Crime Book Club. I am here. We've not got Morgan Cry this time. We have the delightful Gordon Brown.
Yes, I've left my twin back elsewhere. There's actually two of us. I just roll one out each time. We take it in turns. It's my turn tonight. He's in the pub.
Why on earth not? Right, introduce yourself, show off your book, and I'm going to pin us and tag us.
So, Gordon Brown, this is my 10th novel, any day now. Previous two were I was writing under the name Morgan Cry, both set in Spain, with a protagonist called Daniela Coulston. But this one is with a new publisher, so big thanks to Sean and Red Dog Press and to Bloodhound for putting this one out. And it's a bit of a left field change for me in terms of what I usually write. Still got a bit of crime in it, and it has got crime in it, but I have changed it slightly. And in doing so, it seems to have got a good reaction. It's not massively away from where I was. It's probably closer to the first couple of books I ever wrote, which is a bit strange. Maybe I'm going back in time, or maybe I'm just maybe I did say something the other day. After 10 books, and I know there's authors written far more than that, the danger is you write the same thing you wrote and forget about it until someone writes to you and goes, "Excuse me, did you not write that in book one?" So if I've just accidentally written my first book again, sorry team. Didn't mean to do it, but maybe I have. No, I haven't.
Right, so I mean, where to even start? I love the book, absolutely love it. Thank you for the advance copy. I will be buying a copy to get the short story as well, because I really want to see what you've done with the prequel. And obviously, we've got competition prizes tonight as well.
We do.
So, a signed paperback for one UK winner for asking a question that's your favourite of the night.
So, best question gets a signed paperback. The worst question doesn't. The worst question gets 2 signed paperbacks.
And also in the group, in the featured section, there's a pinned post of, explaining the rest of the prize. Yep. So we've got some ebooks open to worldwide winners.
Yeah, we have.
Which is very generous. I got a lovely email from Sean today, so that's really, really helpful.
So that'll boost my sales no end.
Well, let's hope so. I wanted to talk to you about chapter names. There's some
chapter names
in this.
Oh,
Have
yeah,
you got a favourite one? So explain what I'm talking about for a start.
So I've taken, I don't know when this started, I've taken to naming each chapter based on something that occurs in the chapter without giving away anything. In other words, and I have to say some of the titles, sometimes they get a bit rude or sometimes they're a bit off field. But for me, I don't know if, sometimes when I read books, I barely read the chapter. If it's got a chapter title, I fly past it, or a date or something because you're reading the book.
Yeah.
But some of the other ones, I quite like the what the heck in the title. So each one of them, when I'll tell you how to do it. When I'm writing, I usually put a question mark. Like, so I get chapter 6, I'm writing away, put a question mark. Sometimes I actually write a word deliberately to take me somewhere else in the book. So I'll put something really dumb in the chapter title and then think, right, how do I work that in? And if I work it in, it often changes the book. Not completely, but it will take me in a different direction. So some of them, like some of the chapters are really obvious. Like, I can't remember what the first one is on this. The first one is, it's not a date in the first one, isn't it?
Yeah, but I can't just getting it up on my Kindle.
I'm just doing the same thing. Or Chairwoman is the first one. And that just explains because there are 4 women in the hairdresser who are effectively the chairwomen of the hairdressers, and therefore there's a bit about them in it, and that happens each time. And some of the titles I just use on the basis of it's kind of a signal about what's going to happen. So I just get into the habit of doing it. I don't know why, and I quite like it. And I've now done it in the last 4 or 5 books I've done it on.
Yeah, I love it. I really do, because then you find yourself concentrating more as well because you want to see why it's appropriate.
It can be a downside. I can't say the word because it'd be rude, but in the last Morgan Cry book, there's a chapter called Ultra F-word Ed, right?
Right, okay.
The reason is they are so screwed in that chapter. One of the guys says, we're not just F-worded, we're ultra F-worded, right? And I put it in, and I remember the publisher was going, it's a bit heavy as a title. It's okay in the body copy, but it's a bit up front. I said, but that's what the chapter's about. So
they were ultra Yeah,
they were very ultra. Actually, that'd have been a good title for the book.
Excuse me.
I can't really see W.H. Smith or Watson's been too keen in a book called Ultra F-worded.
You never know.
You never know. You never know.
They might just stick you an explicit thingy on the stickers, explicit lyrics. But Monday, June 21st, 1982 was the first chapter. Chairwomen's the second one.
Yep.
I think Cattle Wrangling's one of my favourites.
And that's good because that's a bit of a giveaway if I tell why it's called Cattle Wrangling.
Yeah, you can't say it. No,
you can't. Yeah, no, I like that.
It's just I can't. Oh, Hell's Teeth. I feel crap. That one just really made me laugh.
That's good as well. Yeah.
I think I can get away with saying that.
Basically, it's like a mini book. It's like the title you would call that chapter if it was a book, although you wouldn't be allowed to. Hell's Teeth. I feel crap. You can see that. That'd be a good one for the Amazon cover.
We've got some hellos. So hi Tony, hi Gordon, hi Laura, hi Jonathan.
Hi Jonathan. Hang on a minute. Jonathan. He did the support Bloody Scotland. So just say hi back to Jonathan because he was there. A little star.
Was he there by video link this time?
We had a whole bunch. So we had a mix up this year. So in Bloody Scotland, just to let people know, prior to I'm involved with Bloody Scotland. I was one of the original directors from way back. I was there when it started. A few years ago, I came up with the idea of saying, how do you support authors, new authors, debut authors? And one of the ways of doing it was, I like to go to gigs. And when I go to music gigs, I like to always go and watch the support band because you never know who you'll see. Yeah. And what I did was said, well, why don't we do the same on the panels? So this year we had 22 authors, 5 digital and 17 live in front of the main panels. Literally, they get 3 minutes to say who they are and read a bit from the book. And it just gets them in front of a big audience. Sometimes it's not for the first time. Some of them have done it before. Yeah. So Jonathan was one, but we had 5 video and 17 live this year doing it. That's the most we've ever had. In fact, That's now, we call them Crime in the Spotlight. We call them Spotlighters. And the 100 Spotlighter went through this year. So that's 5. This is the 6th year of doing it. And we've got famous one. Graham McRae Burnett was one. Yes, but no, he actually asked for me for writing advice years ago. See, he wouldn't have got there if it wasn't for me. No Booker prize, no Booker long list without me. I'm sorry, Graham.
So Jonathan wanted to ask. I never called him that. It's going to feel like I'm telling him off. JP wanted to ask, why crime? What drew you to this as a reader and a writer? What is the overriding law? And also, what is your focus as a writer, as in story, characterization, plot, language, or narrative? Geez, JP.
That's a big question. Yeah. I'll answer the first one. I actually, do you know, it's the strangest thing. Sometimes you get asked a question 100 times and you answer it 100 times. And then one day you answer it and you think, actually, that's slightly different to what I said. And this question came up about, why did you write crime? And it led me to realise something about the way I write. I didn't intend to write crime. I tried in the early days. I was a big Stephen King fan. I was a big James Herbert fan. My first couple of attempts in my 20s and 30s were appallingly bad horror or science fiction. And I'm not kidding, they really was just really, really bad. But they are still available to any publisher that wants to take them because I'm sure we could turn them into something. Not sure what, but we could turn it into something. But when I really started out to write, I was in a situation where I used to be a marketing director of a TV company. And I was finishing a contract. And I said to my wife, right, I'm going to give this one more go. And all I had in my head was one line. And that was falling is the last thing I wanted to do. And it was all based on a story I heard about a guy in the 1930s who, during the Depression, lost a lot of money and tried to commit suicide and didn't. He fell out the window and only fell afloor. He was trying to commit suicide. He didn't. Wow. And then years later, he said to his wife in the 50s, if I died that day, what would have happened? Would life have been different? And she said, well, yes, but don't ask me, go and ask your brother, ask friends. And the first time he asked his brother, and his brother said, well, you introduced me to my wife. And the two of us have got a kid at university that's going to be a heart surgeon. So think how many lives he would save. Wow. We would never have met. And that's where that book came from. So when I started to write it, it wasn't a crime book. It was about a guy getting thrown off a building in Glasgow that doesn't get thrown off a building in Glasgow, gets saved right at the last second. And then gets chased by the criminal world. And that's how I got into crime. But the thing I realised was that's how I tend to write now. So one thing for me is I tend to write my way into an idea. It's taken me years to figure it, but basically I start a story and I don't have an idea. I don't start off with, this is going to be about X, Y, and Z, or I've got some spark of inspiration. Most times I sit down and I write 1, 2, 3, 4, and suddenly an idea will come out of it. So I'll just start with a line, and I usually try and keep the line. And therefore, for me, a lot of times it's not the story. I don't have the story in place. I love the characters because I think that's what brings it to life. And I love settings, but I love the characters. And it tends to be, I'll start writing and the character starts to build a story around them because I really don't know where I'm going next. And that's how I've started to do it. And this one was a case in point. This one was based on a very simple thought when I was sitting down to write this, when I started off. Because when I started to write this, I was talking to someone in Zoom and they said to me about, this is the first lockdown, how long are you waiting? You're waiting for things to get better, waiting for everything to open up. And I had this thing, I'd started writing something, I hadn't really got very far, and I had this idea about a girl waiting for her exam results to come through the door. On the basis that, when you think about it, everybody's waiting for something all the time. You might be waiting, if you're young, it's your exam results, or for somebody you quite fancy to drop you a message, or you're waiting on the release of a new game, a new video, or you're waiting on a TV program. While you're waiting, life goes on. And that's what you get is people saying to you, and I thought that's actually quite interesting because really life's what happens in between the waits. And that's where the idea came from, was her waiting. And then as things get worse, there's different waits she goes through and things fall apart for her. But I kind of wrote myself into that just purely by starting her sitting in front of the letterbox, like I did one year, guiltily waiting for my results to come through because I knew they weren't very good.
I do like the use of waiting that you've got throughout the book.
Yeah. And it's different waits. That's what's interesting about it. And there's waits there's good waits. Like you wait for the summer to finish when you're a kid. You don't really wait. You don't, but it's a wait. You know it's going to finish and you know it's coming down the line. And therefore, when you think about it, life is just a series of waits. You're waiting on something else. Unless you're living in the moment all the time, life's a series of waits. That sounds far too deep for this.
So one of the other things that I like is the use of different Scottish words that I'd not heard of before. So
which ones?
There's loads in these books.
Probably is.
But, one I wrote down, a line from the book that I wrote down was, "It pays less than picking coins out of the stank." I only knew what a stank was because Jonathan Whitelaw, I was interviewing him and Debs Masson last week, and he was talking about it because I brought up the different use of words. Shugald, Debs wrote some
great word, shugald. Yeah, shugald, dreek, stank. Stank's a drain, but specifically quite a very special drain. Do you know, this is a schoolboy thing, you know the small drains that are oblong shape, one half of it's solid metal and the other half has got about a dozen holes in it. They're very, very small, yeah. You'll see them in the street, they're very, very small. We used to play marbles on that because each of those holes will take a marble and then what you're trying to do is knock the marbles back out. And we used to play marbles in the stank, which sounds like, it actually sounds like a bad movie. But
it sounds like a grungy band.
It does. Marbles in the Stank. Actually, that's a good title for a book. Marbles in the Stank. Whenever I do my life story, maybe I'll call it that. But so for me, a lot of those words you have to point it out because when you use them when you're writing, it's a bit like if someone's from Newcastle or Liverpool or London or whatever. They've got local words for things. Occasionally, you have to take them out because they don't make much sense. Like, I don't mean take them out, but you kind of get the editor pushes back a bit and says, I'm struggling for the meaning. And it's like the other word, which I adore, is out with.
Okay.
So out with should be in the dictionary, right? It's used across Scotland. And what it means is out with this building means outside the building, or out with this conversation means outside this conversation. Out with anything means outside of whatever. It can be an idea, a shot, a building. It can be a thought. Out with it, but it doesn't exist in the English language, and it should.
Never heard it.
Exactly,
unless you've actually used it and I've read it.
It'll be in there. Out. You can't not use it. Use it all. It's like how else would you say it? You know, out with the following that we're about to do. What else you want to do? I mean, like it just makes sense, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think I've told that there's a story. I think it's Carol Ramsey told me this story. I hate to think it wasn't Carol, but I think it was Carol Ramsey. Said she sent a book to a London editor, and at one point the person's walking along the street and turns into the Close. And the Close is the entrance to a tenement, the entrance to a set of apartments. In Glasgow, they call that the Close, right?
Right.
And the London editor came back and said, "What's a Close?" And she goes, "Well, it's the entrance. It's the bit, the entrance you go in." And he said, "Fine." So when she got the edit back, it said, "Joe walked along the street and turned into the foyer." And he says, no, foyer is not another word for close.
No. That one I could tell you, yeah. Laura's asking, have you ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process? We've had some cracking answers to this, and I've asked you this before.
Yeah, I am extremely guilty. So the way I tend to write is I'll sit down, usually at 5 in the morning. I'm a really early riser. During lockdown, I loved it because I got so much work done. I'll write about 2,000 words, and I know they're going to be a bit of a mess. But because I don't plan it, I then have to figure, I just want an idea of what's going next. Yep. So what I'll tend to do is then go for a walk later on and spin it in my head. Yeah. Or talk it out. And that's when it gets really silly because I'm not really conscious of doing it, but I'll walk along the street and I'll definitely be going like that. If you could do it with that, and this would be, and that would be, and if they were dancing, and it could be, and I'll do that. My wife just goes nuts when she's walking next to me, and all I'm doing is going, "What's next? What's next? What's next?" in my head. And I can make it worse. The worst one I ever did was I was at the local library. My library, I now live back almost a mile from where I was like when a kid. Our local library down the road, I go in to type. And one of the things I'll do is plug my headphones on, and I love trance dance, love electronic music, trance dance, Finnish electronic. That's what I play loud when I'm typing. And I went into the library and I went into the reading room, put the computer on, put the music in my ears, and I was listening to Chicane, Stoned in Love, which is a great track, and it's Tom Jones singing on it. Brilliant dance track. I get told to sit down. I didn't realise I was dancing. I just kind of got up because I was thinking about something. And there was all these people reading in their newspapers, and I'm giving it, yeah. No. And then I could see it out the corner of my eye, someone waving. It was a librarian going, "Sit down, sit down, sit down." And what I'd done was, in standing up, I yanked out the cord. So the music was blasting across the library. So the answer is yes, I do act it out.
Okay, that's a new favourite. Gordon Brown dancing in the library. I love it. So we were talking a minute ago about characters and settings, and I always feel like with your settings, there's something, they're more than just a character in their own right. So two of my favourites are Daniela's Bar and the Hairdressers.
Oh yeah, the Hairdressers.
Any Day Now. The Hairdressers, I mean, we're describing like run-down, dingy places, but with a lot of heart brought into them. You know, they'd be absolutely awful if it wasn't for the people bringing the life into them that just kind of takes the edge off it and makes them more interesting. And I love that.
Well, it's set in 82, starts in 82, finishes in 97. Hairdressers now, when you walk in, almost all of them are shiny. Like, they've all been done up recently. Shiny mirrors, shiny floors, swept regular, really nice chairs. My memory of the hairdressers and the barbers was very different, especially my mum's. My mum's always felt like you were walking into a cloud of like some chemical gas because they used so much hairspray and the hairdryers chucked out so much steam. There was just a constant fog, plus everybody smoked. So my overriding memory
all that hairspray.
Oh, I know, it's ridiculous. Well, and there would also be coffee or tea. It would be more tea than coffee. So there's steam coming off it. So when you walked in, it was like a wall. And nowadays, everything's double glazing. And to be fair, it was in the 80s, but a lot of the shops still had single panes. So as a result, the window was just messed up. So if you were outside, you couldn't see in. And if you were inside, you couldn't see outside. And the other thing that would happen is, and it was the same, a lot of the hairdressers, they were just living on the edge, a lot of them. Some of them were really good, but back then, I remember linoleum floors that were still torn. Torn linoleum is a very kids thing for me. Yeah, people don't, no one would leave torn linoleum down nowadays. But actually, back then, it was too expensive to replace, so you just tripped. It was easier.
A lot.
That whole thing about the the pecking order in a hairdresser was real for my mother. In the book, there's a pecking order. Who's allowed to talk, who's not allowed to talk. That whole thing that Catherine works behind means she doesn't actually get to say much. That was true. That's exactly it. If you were a regular that went in weekly and paid a lot of money, you had the right to talk. If you weren't and you were someone that turned up every so often, it wasn't you weren't allowed to talk. You were just out the loop. You had no idea. The conversation was a bit like you'd missed last night's telly, but you couldn't have a chat because you'd missed the telly. So for me, I love settings like that. I love stuff that brings it to life in my head. Because then when you plonk the people inside, they behave differently. They have to, like the toilet, I'm not going to mention it, but there's certain bits of it you go, really? But it's my memory of the 80s, I have to say, and I'm old enough to have been old enough in the 80s. That's too old.
You wrote, actually, I made a note of it, that you in your acknowledgements, you took a trip back to the 80s and 90s, you know, as you were thinking about the book and the planning of it. So anything that kind of came back to you that you were surprised by?
Two things that have happened recently. One is, if you watch the Netflix series Stranger Things, it's set in the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
What I love about that is the attention to detail in terms of 80s costumes, brands, dress. It's so accurate, but so much more vibrant than I remember. My view of the 80s was a bit duller. It almost felt like, whereas you watch that, and it turns out they did a lot of research. So my trip back to the 80s is still a bit cloudy. That could be because in 1980 to 84, I was at uni, and university involved an awful lot of drinking. And that may well be why I don't really remember that period as well as I should overall. But for me, going back then, you still have to do a bit of research. I still have to look up dates or when did things happen, because it gets a bit confused. But some of that stuff's just straight out of my memory. It's just literally, I can see like John Menzies, which is long since gone as a bookshop. That's the one I used to go in as a kid. I can see myself walking in, I know where everything is. I can almost put my hand on it. And I've done that a lot in the book. There's lots of, like there's a scene set in Tea in the Park, which is a festival in Scotland. And I was involved with Tea in the Park as the sponsorship side for quite a few years. Oh, sorry.
That's quite all right. I'm sat here coughing.
And because of that, I can see, I've even put, there's a guy in it, there's a person in it. He's only called out once, and he's a real person, and I haven't told him he's in the book yet. And I can see him standing where he's standing in the book, and I deliberately put him in, and he hasn't read the book yet, and I haven't told him yet. So for me, it's very much, I like to have been where I set books. It doesn't matter if I set them in America or here or wherever over the years. I like to have been in the place, because in my head, I can turn left, I can turn right, I can walk out that door. I remember where it is. Will it be accurate? Probably not. There's chances are if I went back for reality, it would look completely different. But for me, it brings it to life.
I'm just going to say to everyone, because we've got a lot of questions.
Okay, fire away.
I'm just going to say that if we don't get to anybody's question, I will look at them later on. You won't miss out if your question isn't asked. So keep asking them for your chance to win the signed paperback. Yeah. UK only. I do need to keep saying that.
Actually, I think, should I tell them what the book's about? Would it help? Because I don't think we've done it yet.
We've been sat talking on and off for the last hour before we came on. So yeah, I think we were just in conversation mode.
So the book's set in 82 to 97. As I said, it's about waiting, but it's not really. It's more than that. Catherine's a 16-year-old who in the book is abandoned by her mother early on. It's not a giveaway plot spoiler.
Yeah.
And effectively, she tries to avoid falling into a life of crime by getting involved in rock music and setting up her own band. And that's how she tries to escape. So the book's about her journey trying to escape crime. And in the background, there is a Cold War secret, is the best way to put it. Her mother's not been honest with her about what she used to do in the 60s. And it could have a massive effect in Catherine's life, but she doesn't know about it. So the whole book is leading up to the fact, will she find out about it? What is the secret? Why are things happening to me that I don't understand? So that's and I can't tell you what the Cold War secret is, because then it would be a spoiler alert.
It would be a huge spoiler, yeah.
So there's a bit of coming of age about it. There's a bit of crime about it. And there's a tiny little bit of international intrigue built in.
Yeah.
Is that a fair call?
Yeah. Coming of age was what I was thinking about it today, because obviously I read it earlier in the week, and there was a scene where And again, not giving anything away. It's really early on. It made me cry. It made me, you know, that kind of sob that catches in your throat, that kind of cry.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people wandering around, and she's picking up the vibe that something's not right somewhere with the mum, and she doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
And she kind of exaggerates it all in her head. And I'm not going to say anything else about the scene. I think that's enough detail. But that made me cry. I mean, I've laughed and cried my way through this book.
That's good to know.
Yeah, laughed a lot. But that, as a mum who's got teenagers, you know, around that age, that, oh my word, that was painful to read.
And it's based on experience when you're doing that. I tend to remember when I was a kid or when I was younger, it was very easy to let your head run away with stuff. You weren't old enough to rein it back.
Yeah.
And therefore it was easy to get somewhere bad very, very quickly. And in that scene, that's exactly what happens. She just gets herself to a bad place very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And it is quite an emotional thing to write, because if you flip it, if I found my son or my daughter doing that, I would struggle with that. And I know I would be trying everything, you know, like, my God, how did you get there? But that's when you're that age, you haven't got the experience to rein it in. So if it happens, and that the book's full of that, because she's learning stuff all the way through the book.
Yeah.
That she doesn't know how to deal with, and she has to figure it. I would say that one of the things I would say about Catherine is you often find that you would say, is she the hero of the book? She's not necessarily the one that figures the stuff out. She actually struggles. It's funny because that's one of the lines they use. We'll talk about the single in a minute, but one of the lines they use in the single is she struggles to figure shit out. She just does. But that's the reality of life. You know, I read a lot of books where people turn out, they're like a mini Jack Reacher. Like they were born suddenly with this massive intelligence, and some people are. But I think more realistically, that's not what happens in people. They just have to learn. You have to make mistakes.
And we will come to the single in a second. Oh, okay. So, in fact, let's go to the single right now. And it would have been nice for Gordon to be able to introduce it. So it's a music video for Any Day Now. I believe it's sung by Daisy, because this is Gordon's bit to introduce, and he has just absolutely disappeared. So let's show you this music video. So I'm going to hide for a moment, and we're going to let you watch the music video. It's 3 minutes.
Still don't understand how you could just start and leave, and though it didn't crash land, time just won't stop chasing me, and I kept holding on for days. Yeah, I cried as I begged to be saved, so just wait as I figure shit out. Any day now. So meet me in the middle. Pick me up, break me out of this hell. Give me luck to run out of, something to throw in the wishing well. Don't let me fall back out of line, 'cause the hole might run deeper this time. So just wait as I figure shit out. Any day now. I can't wait anymore. Any day So just wait as I figure shit out. Any day now.
Am I back?
Oh, you are back.
I don't know what happened. It was no disconnection. Plus, what's worse is I jumped and I knocked my orange juice across the sofa.
Oh, is that right? So I saw you do something, but I didn't know what you jumped up for. I thought you were going to grab something.
It's a half a pint of sofas. Oh, my wife's not going to be happy.
You should have run and grabbed a towel quick.
I did.
Did you? Is that what you're doing?
I'm not managed to save it, I don't think. Anyway, so what was that about? About 6 months ago, I'm lucky enough to have a place in Spain, and one of the guys I know out there, his daughter Daisy, is in a band called Jack and Daisy, and Jack and Daisy have been touring up and down Spain playing gigs. They're a really talented duo, and one of the things they did one of the things they did was they used to record songs. They used to go on a website, and you could write in and say, "I want you to write a song about," and they would do and record it. It was a way of earning money. But I asked them to do one for the book, but purely as a promotional thing, right? It wasn't designed to be anything else. But they've subsequently now been signed. They're now with a label, and I got a phone call from the manager saying that Jack and Daisy wanted to put it out as a single. So it's gone out as a single. So it's now available on Spotify. You can actually download it as a single.
And we'll not only that, a link to it in the group afterwards.
Yep, and they've also done a video which they're going to edit for the rest of it. So suddenly now there's a single to go with the book any day now, and it's based on the synopsis. Daisy wrote the words based on the book. Wow. So that's why they figure shit out, but that's where it comes, because that's what Catherine spends her time in the book trying to do it.
Yeah.
So they did it. So for Jack and Daisy, they've been brilliant with it. I couldn't be in the video. I had to be somewhere else in Spain. But the local council in Javia, which is where we are, were very kind and gave us a loan of one of the halls they use, the Casa del Cultura. And their father is vaguely in the back of the video, and I wanted to be in it just to say I'd been in a pop video, but I couldn't be there. So I'm now depressed.
Maybe they'll let you be in another one.
No, maybe I'll Mac myself in. Like playing the drums in the background or something. But it's great. It's been good, and it's getting airplay. So it's their new single that's out. They've got jackandDaisymusic.com is where they put everything. But it's been great to have it. It's just something different.
Maybe you should do a picture of yourself. Is it Bernie Sanders that is photoshopped in, sat in his chair with a blanket on his knees?
Yeah, I know. I need to Photoshop myself into everything from now on in. That's it. Any new videos, I'm quite happy to just to make up for the despair at not being allowed inside my own video. Well, it's not my video, it's theirs, to be fair.
We've got a lot of congratulations to you and to them, which is brilliant. What JP's saying, can't beat the 80s and 90s. Somebody said, I loved the hairdresser setting. It took me back to my childhood, plus the music as well. Now, I think the question that I've got here might be from Kaz. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. Gordon, are the book titles based on songs? That'll be the Days of Fab Buddy Holly song. I assume they are, because it's very music focused, the book.
No, the actual, I have a habit of naming a book on minute one. I have a habit of naming the book. I'll write down the title of the book and then start. And when I did Any Day Now, it actually didn't even feature, Catherine's surname wasn't Day. I just had this thing about you're waiting for anything any day now. That's when I started writing. That's where it came from. What then happened was, because it was set in the 80s and I was putting in 80s music, the publisher was talking to Sean at Red Dog Press, and I was saying, should I do a little short story that goes on the web, which you don't really need to read the book, but could be a bit of a prequel when she was at school. So I wrote one called, I've got a copy, That'll Be the Day.
That'll Be the Day.
And there's a reason it's, the reason it's Day is when you read the book, there's a very good reason why it's called That'll Be the Day, because the music's involved in it. And it's just the use of the day word just made so much more sense. But I didn't even know we were doing this. Sean I thought this was going on the web, and then suddenly he said, no, I've decided to print it. So when you buy the book off a Red Dog at the moment, you actually get this free as well. So it comes with it at the same time.
Is that with the ebook, or is that with
with the paperback, the hardback version of it? You get it. So it comes. So I wrote it as it was going to go on the web, but he liked it that much, he's actually published it. So it's now come out as a short story. So at some point I'll have to. I was going to read it out, but I realised it's nearly 2,000 words, and that takes longer than you think.
It really does. Yeah.
It does. It takes a while. So it's good. So now I've got the short story with it and a single. So I'm just waiting to see. I'm just waiting for Mr. Spielberg to phone because he's bored at the moment and he hasn't got his next movie lined up, and that'll kind of do me. And I'll only agree for him to do it if I can be in the film.
I have actually got. I'm just trying not to wreck the pile of stuff I've got here. This is another one of Red Dog's. So Busman's Holiday by Chris MacDonald. That came with the hardback signed special edition with the first 6 Stonebridge Mysteries books in. So I got that for my mum, but I kind of kept the short story.
Well, if you want a really weird one, I love short story format, but it's incredibly hard to write. I find short stories much harder than novels. But I got a strange conversation. I did an Edinburgh book tour in the summer, and I was in at the Edinburgh Bookshop in Edinburgh, up near Morningside in Edinburgh, and we were talking about the fact that, as a bit of a joke, could you have an author in a window typing, right? So if you want a workspace, could you have a bookshop and then stick an author in the window, a bit like a pet monkey at a zoo? Like basically you're sitting there and people are walking past, right? And I jokingly said, I'll do it, right? I'll give it a go. And I did it on Saturday. So I went to the Edinburgh Bookshop. Well, I wasn't facing out. They had a sofa, which they've got right at the door. They gave me a little table. And then what they said was, I used a trick we've used for 4 Blokes in Search of a Plot, the thing I do with Mark Leggett, Neil Broadfoot and Douglas Skelton. I said to the shop, the people in the shop or anyone in advance, give me a protagonist and give me a weapon. And I'll write a short story there and then. And I did. And when we drew out, there was a whole bunch of them. When I drew it out, the weapon was a flip-flop and the protagonist was a samosa seller. So I've written a 2,000-word short story sitting in their place, and it's with them now. I don't know what they're going to do with it. They were talking about pinning it to the wall. But so I find that I love doing that sort of stuff, but I think novels are actually easier than short stories.
Maybe we should have a resident author at our UKCBC event next year. We should have somebody sat in a corner.
Yeah, just sitting there doing this. Yeah, in the background, just feed them. Honestly, people kept coming up and talking to you. I did start to feel like I was in a zoo a bit. It was really funny because we had a sign, author at work, please feel free to disturb. Right, so they could come up and I got fed tea and coffee and biscuits. Like, it was great. And then get to write a story. Ian Rankin came in to see us. So Ian Rankin came in to say hello, and then I had a couple of other ones came in, and someone's asking, will you be releasing the story? I think they're going to either put it up on the website, but I think they're talking about putting it up in the actual shop as well. So if you really want to read a story about a samosa seller as the killer and a flip-flop as the weapon, that took some working out how that does.
I don't think I've ever wanted to read anything more.
And it's not what you think, because Ian Rankin said, well, you could choke them with a flip-flop, or you could spend 2 days beating them up. Like, that would take that long with a flip-flop, and it's neither of that.
Imagine beating somebody to death with a flip-flop.
Well, we said you'd have to find a seller.
Dedication.
It would take you a while. It would just, honestly, you would give in yourself. But so that's that story. Hopefully, it probably will come out in some form. It will definitely go in the store, I think.
I think it's a great idea, because you get kind of authors in residence in different places. I can't think of anywhere better than a bookshop.
Yeah, it's great fun. I think you should have more authors in residence in bookshops. Just have them in the corner. They're just tame. See if you feed them. Just don't let any of the readers near them. You know, they might bite. Just sit there and type. Give them a computer. I love doing it, because I met so many readers coming in, because the shop was really busy and they just chat away to you, which made it really difficult to write. But I got it there.
I can't believe you got 2,000 words done. Anyone's talking to me and I can't get anything done. Not a chance.
It was worse when Ian was in, and there was like photos as well, and there's a couple of photos online. But I got a run at it, so it'll be interesting to see what anyone thinks, because it is completely written live. There was a tiny little bit of editing on the Sunday just to sort it, but most of it as it came out.
Madness. I want to know why 49,000 people booed you.
All right, at a football match. So I've got this in my biog, right, and it's been there for years. In a previous life, way back in the 90s, I used to be the brand director for Tennent's, the brewery, as was in Scotland. And we sponsored the Cup, Scottish Cup. So the FA or the Scottish Cup, not the FA Cup, the Scottish Cup, the in Scotland. And one of the things that happened was, in the old days, what they used to do for the semi-finals and for the final was they put a big red T on the pitch, which is the big red T is the symbol for Tennent's, a bit like Nike swoosh, only it's a Scottish symbol.
I can see the T in my head.
And it's red. They put a big one in the pitch, and the players would stand at the top, and then the whoever the chief exec was of the SFA, someone from the sponsor and the local MP would walk out and shake the hands of the players. Doesn't happen anymore. They stopped doing it. Doesn't happen. Well, because of my position, I was one of the ones at the cup final. I had to go out and shake the hands and walk out onto the pitch. And it was being played at Ibrox Park because Hampden was shut. So it was 49,000 fans, Kilmarnock versus Falkirk. And I had to walk out. And the guy I went out with was a guy called Jim Farry, who you probably don't know. But Jim Farry was the secretary for the Scottish FA through the late 80s and early 90s. He was a really nice guy, but on TV he came across very officious, blazer-atty, high-pitched voice, very official. Every question was answered without answering it, if you know what I mean. So he wasn't particularly liked by the fans. Actually, if you met him, Jim was a lovely guy, but he had this officious way about him. So just as we're walking out onto the pitch, 3 minutes or 5 minutes before kickoff, the tannoy goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome on the pitch from the sponsors, Mr. Gordon Brown, and from the Scottish Football Association, Mr. Jim Farry." And as we walked out, 49,000 people booed. Like just everybody in the stadium. And it's hair standing in the back of your neck when everybody does it. And Jim Farry turns round to me halfway across the pitch and goes, "Gordon, they don't like you much, do they?" Well, not me. I still remember, it was hair. It was so loud. It just made it was just a weird feeling. So that's why I got booed by 49,000 people.
See, now that leads me nicely into banter. One of the biggest things that had me laughing was the banter between people. And there's a scene, I won't say what the scene is, but there's a scene where two characters, Billy and Isabel, are really laying into each other. And just kind of stood in the middle, watching them like a tennis game. And that was hilarious.
That's the cue in the Dole. They're at the Dole, so it doesn't give anything away. Yeah. That I love. And it's not just Glasgow, to be fair, any city has it. If you just stand in between someone's conversation, it's amazing what you hear. Yeah. and for me, the joy of that is you don't really know why. There'll be history to that conversation you can never be privy to, right? So it might sound overly aggressive, it might sound stupid, but there'll be a reason why they're having that argument, right? And I love the fact if you drop yourself in the middle of it, you're like, what in the heck is going on? And there's a couple of them in there where it kind of comes out of, I've happened to me a couple of times sitting on the bus, like you're sitting behind someone or in front of somebody, and you desperately want to get involved just to find out what they're talking about, because they've just gone off and one of you think, what? I sat in the bus once. We used to live in a different part of Glasgow, right? Two guys got on the bus, right, and spent about 20 minutes discussing what colour is the glass, right? Which is clear, but they were arguing over the colour of the glass, and in such a way, I thought they've had this debate before. Like clearly, somewhere along the line, there's some, and I couldn't, because they were starting to talk, no. See, if you take the glass and you hold it up against black, then you hold it up against white, it changes the colour a bit. And if it changes the colour a bit, it must be because it's got a bit of colour. And this whole conversation about what colour is glass went on for a bit. I've not put that in. It's those conversations I love. I just, you know, there's no beginning, there's no end, and there's no context. So you just have to take them for what they are. And that's where that came out of. That wasn't a conversation I heard, but that's where those conversations come from.
I want to talk a bit more about Catherine. So she's 16 when the book starts. One thing I kept thinking is she's got a good moral compass. She doesn't always make the right decisions. She learns from things. She learns quickly. She's still in that kind of the throes of youth where the anger, it's all encompassing and you can't hold yourself back.
Yep.
So what's it like writing a 16-year-old
girl? Yeah, it's a good point. A
16-year-old girl, or just a 16-year-old in general. I mean, not an easy thing.
I just think back to the moments in time when I was younger, when my mum and dad, when my dad died young, but when I was younger, and you think back to how you reacted to stuff, right? and you know it's not right. And I can remember those moments where it is a bit about that naivety of not really knowing, but your hormones kick in. You're definitely not going to do the right thing. You're definitely going to do what it is you want to do. And while I'm writing, I put myself in that mode. I try and think of myself. One of the images I use, which is a bit weird, is I always think of myself as smaller than the person that's in front of me.
Okay.
Right? And I know that sounds a bit odd, but I always feel like I'm desperately trying to look up to someone and not really understanding. So what ends up happening is you feel like a little child a bit. Now, that person might be 13, you might be 25, or it's an age thing, and that doesn't work. Some people that are 40 are less mature than someone at 20. But when I did Catherine, I just kept thinking of those feelings or those moments when things didn't go well in conversations with my mum or dad, or the daft stuff you used to do with your friends, that when you look back on it, you think, really? And more importantly, the stuff you worried about, that really, like, when you think back, you think, why was I even bothered about that? But at the time,
it's all consuming.
And it's massively important to you. But that's how you shape yourself, I think. I think when you're writing books like this, because the next book I've got is a couple of kids as protagonists as well. And that's the way you learn. And that's what the book effectively is her just learning. You're reading as she's learning.
Yeah.
I like to write in first person, present tense, right? So the only world I can see in Catherine's book is through her eyes. I haven't got the luxury of going next door or seeing her friends doing what they're doing before they turn up. So you kind of have to morph into that person and just cruise through thinking. And it's not I don't sit there and think, what would a 16-year-old say? It's not what I do. I just write it. And also the other thing is, as much as you're that person, you're hearing other people, like the scene in the hairdresser, or you're talking about the scene in the doll. You're also observing from the outside in a kind of really innocent way sometimes. Like the conversation of the hairdresser's got a tinges of, I don't need to say it, but there's tinges of adult conversation in there. And she's sitting on the outside of it. And you can have a bit of fun with that because you know what they're talking about. And she knows not to interrupt, but she desperately wants to. And that's what I used to think being a kid was at times. I always remember parties. When I used to go to parties with my grandmother and grandfather, I always say this, do you remember Les Dawson, the comedian? And he used to have Brian, not Barraclough, what's his name? Roy. Oh, is it Barraclough? The two of them dressed up as older women. And they used to talk to each other. Is it Roy Barraclough? It might be. I can't remember. Apologies if I got it wrong. But they used to, it's what they didn't say. So if you ever remember, they used to go, I had to go to the hospital. A bit wrong. Like they mouthed it. My gran did that. It was, you couldn't understand a conversation because, like, if you were in the room, she was desperately trying to have the conversation but not let you hear it. And that just made it worse for me. So for me, that's what Catherine's like. She's actually eavesdropping on a lot of conversations at times and sometimes gets it wrong. Picks up the wrong end of the stick, doesn't really understand what's going on.
Which is really useful for an author.
It is, especially when I don't know what's going on either.
Somebody has asked, did you decide to go back to your Scottish roots with setting the book in Glasgow?
Yes, I'd written the Spanish books, the Morgan Cry books, the two of them are set in Spain because I got a place in Spain, and that was very...
I'll just interrupt you and say Tony said, Roy Barraclough.
Very good, Tony.
Thank you,
That was good. I thought it was, but my memory's not what it
should be.
Sorry,
carry on.
That's okay. Morgan Cry was deliberately an attempt to write something set in Spain, but it's the expat community in Spain. When I came back to write this one, it was lockdown, and it was that waiting thought, and it could have been anywhere in Britain when I started off the first line, but it kind of had to be Scottish, partly because what I do know about the music business, which is very little,
Really?
Right?
Because it comes across as you having like a lot of knowledge based on this book.
I was involved at the edges because we used to sponsor Tea in the Park, and you used to hear people talking about it a lot. And I love my live music. I go to endless gigs. So my knowledge comes from that side, talking to musicians, going to events, going to gigs. It doesn't come from running something, yeah? And once I did that, it became blindingly obvious I was going to set it in Scotland because it was just such a simple thing to start with, mainly because some of the events she goes to, like the club she plays in, I know exactly where the first club is. That doesn't exist. The inside of it exists in a different place, but the actual club itself is a garden. It's not a club, but at the same time, the inside of the club is an identical club that I used to go to. and it was a Scottish one, and that's why. So I felt, and also I was trying to bring out a 16-year-old, and the only 16-year-old I really know is me, and I'm Scottish. Whereas, like, older, I could say I could play around with it, but that's what I was using. So it was definitely a deliberate attempt to go back in some ways, but it was more the story just led me down that route.
So what are you writing at the moment? Because I'm wondering if we're going to see any characters from Any Day now again.
So there's two things. There's a second book out with Red Dog Press called No More Games, coming out in spring. And it's two 12-year-olds in Glasgow set in the winter of 1973 during the 3-day week, power cuts, all miners' strike and all the rest of it. And it's even closer to anything I've ever written about me, because it's in a place called Sims Hill, which is a scheme not 2 miles from here that I grew up in. And the lead character's called Ginger, right? The what you call it, so the red hair. And the other guy is a friend of mine from school. And it is me at 12 years old getting into trouble with what were heavyweight gangs. So there's humour in it, but the idea is it's written from a 12-year-old, and they get involved in the Glasgow gangs of the 70s. And they have to rescue the day. So that's coming out. So No More Games is coming out in probably March, April time. I don't know exactly when. And I've got another book out on submission at the moment, which is, again, left field. It's nothing like either of those two. So I'll not say what it is because it's only just gone out. But from my point, it's out in submission just now. Whether there's a second, I kind of know where Any Day Now might go. I kind of in my head, I know for the first time in a long time, I don't know the whole book, but I kind of know where it will go. So it very much depends how it sells. It'll depend on the publisher. The deal at the moment is for 2 books, but I kind of know where it would go if I have to go back down, because there's a kind of path in the book that takes you somewhere, and I've worked out the first bit of it because I kind of know what I'd want to do with it.
Somebody wants to know why your clock's not telling the correct time. Got a clock above your head, and it's about 12 minutes fast.
Yeah. Okay. So if you came to the house, that would drive every single clock in the house is about 11 minutes fast. Every one of them, right? And my mates hate this, right? I've been doing this. I don't wear a watch. Haven't had a watch for about 35 years. Every clock. The reason is, in my head, I know I'm not going to be late, right? If I have to leave by 8 and leave by then, I've left by 10 too, right? Now, I know that, right? I know they're 10 minutes fast, right? But I still leave. So my wife, she hates it. Every clock, the cooker clock, the clock in the kitchen, the only clocks that are accurate are the phones, right? And if I could set it 10 minutes fast, I would, but Apple don't let you do it. So every clock I have, everywhere, the place we've got in Spain, in the car, every single clock is 10 minutes fast.
I did wonder if that was going to be your answer when I asked the question.
It is, and I've been doing it for 30 odd years, and I know it's right, but that's it would. I've got a couple of. I mean, I've got a wee bit of OCD, but a couple of mates. I'm not saying OCD in terms of I know there's a medical condition, but in terms, it drives them nuts. That they would go around the house and change the clock if they could.
I'm okay with it. We used to have it when, not so much now, but when the kids were really little, I used to have different times on different clocks in different rooms, because then I was never quite sure. So we always set off early. No matter how much time I spend getting ready, I will be out the door in the last minute. If I've got an hour to sit there and wait, something will come up last minute and I'll still be dashing out the door. It drives me insane, drives my husband insane, drives everybody insane.
Do you want me to? There's a couple of questions I could give fast answers to. So, Tony, the Club in 31 Bones is not real, but it's based on a whole ton of bars that I have been to since I started going to Spain in the 80s. Notes on the roof, darkened windows, John Smith's Ale on sale, everybody's reading the Daily Mail or the Sun. It's just a conglomeration of those bars. That's the answer to that one. Will there be more?
We can find the video in the book club that we can tag Tony in to show where you imaginary set it.
Oh, I actually shot a video. That's right, I did. I shot a video.
Yeah, it's in the book club somewhere. We'll find it.
Will there be more Daniela Coulston? Don't know. That's down to the publisher. Got to wait for that.
I was convinced that you'd already said that there were going to be more. Oh, no, right, okay. Who do I need to write to?
You write to Polygon, write to Berlin and ask them. The 73 one, it's not quite the Ice Cream Wars, although it is about the same time, but it's not quite. The Ice Cream Wars were a bit later. sub-characters in Any Day Now, the two main sub-characters are actually, Catherine's two friends, and a guy who is Mr. Golonowski, who is the person that helps them. He's in at the beginning, so you kind of know it. But those three characters are the two
friends
were designed to be band members only, and then became much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Jenny was a friend for a long time. Jenny's a school friend.
And Daisy comes in later in life, but ends up being just as good a friend.
Yeah.
And both of those were supposed to be band members, but they end up being more than that. And then the character in the background wasn't actually going to be in most of the book. He just became too interesting because he's based on something that really happened in the Cold War, and I can't explain. So
because it'll give it away. Yeah,
it will give it away. Is over for that point of view. What was there? Was there other questions there?
Yeah, somebody was asking what you've been reading.
Oh,
favorite author. What do you like to read?
Favorite author.
Thank you for that, Jane.
I love King, and I've read most or anything of. I've been reading Lee Child back again because Andrew Grant, Lee's brother's now writing them, and I know Andrew is Andrew Child, so I've been reading their books. I've started reading Helen Field's new book, Institution. But the other thing I've been doing is, because of Bloody Scotland, I can't give you a list of it, but I've been reading a lot of debut author stuff. So it's first-time books, or actually, instead of reading traditional books, or not traditional books, instead of reading books where authors got 8 or 9 or 10, I've been picking up books. Did a bit of David Baldacci. I picked up one of his books just because I was looking for something different. And then the rest of it will be fact books. Like, how does quantum mechanics work? I love reading nonsense like that I don't understand. I've got an entire book called Beyond Weird, and I'm 3/4 of the way through. I have no idea what it's talking about. Absolutely. I mean, it's not like a mystery novel. I just no idea what it's about. But I love factual books, so that's kind of what I'm reading at the moment.
And we've got about a minute and a half left. So do you want to give us a recap of what you've written, where we can find you on social media? So make sure you get that in. Tell us everything. You've got a minute and a half to plug yourself.
So Any Day Now is out, and if you get it today for a limited period on Kindle, it's only 99p. So it's on a very limited offer. So if you go on now, it'll go up, but they've launched it at 99p. So you get that on Amazon, you'll get it on Kobo, I think, you'll get it elsewhere. If you want a copy of it, reddogpress.co.uk, because then you'll get the free short story, which will come with it at the same time. If you want to find me, the Twitter's Goja Brown, which sounds a bit odd. I wish I'd picked a better Twitter handle than that. But actually, all the information is on gordonjbrown.com, and you have to put the J in. And I've now had that website so long, Google now finds me and not Gordon Brown, the ex-Prime Minister. So if you put Gordon J. Brown in, you will find me on somewhere inside.
That was pretty thorough. I'm impressed.
That's. I think I've run out of things to say. I am on Instagram and I have no idea how it works.
I've kind of given up with Instagram at the minute.
It's kind of a bit of a dark art. You know, are you on the story or the grid? I've got no clue what you're talking about. But I've connected my Facebook to Instagram, and somehow that magically works. I deeply suspect I'm putting the wrong stuff up, but hey. So that's how you find out more. I'm doing something somewhere along the line.
Thank you to everyone who's asked questions. Gordon will have a look, and I'll announce it tomorrow. And at the same time, I will pull names out of a hat for everyone who's entered the ebook one.
Yep.
So,
can I just do a thank you to Sam, to yourself, to Kaz, to the whole crew at UK Crime Book Club for what you do, because I think it's brilliant. And also the support through Bloody Scotland, etc. And also thanks to everybody else that's tuned in to listen tonight. As I said, you can find my stuff. If you go to Gordon J. Brown, you'll be able to find it. And Jack and Daisy single's now out at the moment, so you can get that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Again,
no problem.
I always have a blast when you come on. I was before we came on because obviously we were talking for a bit and then we went off and then we came back. I was walking around, I won't sing it, but you know the song Golden Brown?
Yeah. Triangles.
I was singing to myself, never a frown with Gordon Brown. Just wandering around singing it.
I don't mind that. The song I hated most when I was younger is it's not called Jilted John, but you know the John, because Jilted John had that line, Gordon is a moron, in it. And I suffered all the way through the punk rock era. Yeah, I know. Although I will point out the best thing about the book is the song is Gordon gets the girl and he doesn't. That's the only thing. I spent years people singing Gordon as a moron. It's just not. I mean, that's just. What would you do with that?
And on that note, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Sam.